Welcome, everybody. Welcome to one more session here from Cloud Lunch and Learn. I'm Jackson Feldin from the team, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. Today we have a very interesting subject: take control of cost with Azure Cost Management. And then to help us on that, we have Martin Copeland. And I remember myself when I used to support loads of clients out there, and the kind of initial journey going to the cloud cost can be a little bit scary at the beginning for those people. But anyway, Martin is here to make all clear for us. Martin, if you want to do a quick intro, and then later on I will share your screen, and then you can run the show, I would say.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Jackson. So, hi everyone. First of all, not my first time with Cloud Lunch and Learn. So, thanks for everyone for having me back. I guess first of all, just a little bit about me. So I'm the head of DevOps at a UK MSP called Transparency. My day-to-day role involves building our cloud native multi-tenant cloud management platform that our customers use, as well as working towards DevOps principles within our own organization, as well as offerings that we give to clients as well. So it's quite a multi-faceted role. I'm a Microsoft MVP in Azure as well as a Microsoft certified trainer. And I also get involved with the DevOps Institute as well, who are one of the bodies responsible for advocating DevOps across the globe. And I'm an ambassador with them as well. So I spend quite a lot of time alongside the work that I do as an MVP. Also doing pretty much exactly the same for DevOps, but for the DevOps Institute as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, that probably you are a very busy guy, I would say.
Yeah.
Anyway, for the guys new here on the channel, now you can see on your screen. It would be great if you guys could follow the link. I will post the link in a few seconds to do a quick registration. That's a way you can support our channel in here. And then on top of that as well, you can get some additional resources from Microsoft all about our main subject for today, that is cost management. And then in the 2 seconds I will post the link if you guys could do a quick registration, and then to get access for those additional material as well. Okay, I think that's all from me at the moment. And I was talking to Martin already. The best way to do is, if you have any questions at any stage, please just type on the chat box, and then I will ask those questions to Martin, and I'm sure he can tackle all of those questions you might have. Okay, Martin, let me start sharing your screen. And here, I believe we are good to go. And then, Martin, I will be here on the background. If you need anything, just let me know. Otherwise, I would say the floor is yours.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi again, everyone. First of all, so in this session, we are going to be talking about how to take control of your costs with Azure Cost Management. Now, as Jackson was saying just before we started, one of the big things that I still hear from customers today who are both experienced at the cloud and are new to the cloud is how to control their costs. And it's something that stays top of mind for customers, and something that is obviously an important thing to be doing, as everything you do on your Azure platform effectively invokes some kind of cost, providing that resource is not free to run, obviously. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at a couple of things. So we're going to have a little bit of a discussion, and I'm going to talk you through the concept of Finops. And the reason I want to do that is it's really fundamental to make sure that you have a practice within your organization to be able to view, control, manage, and produce reports along with cost, and being able to understand them. So I want to talk about the practice of Finops a little bit first of all, and how that works and how it looks. And then we're going to have a look through Azure Cost Management, look at some of the options we have available to us, and as well as drill into some of the cost analysis and see some of the things that we can do to help get an understanding of our costs. Okay, so I guess first of all, what is Finops? So Finops is all around providing financial accountability within your organization. So Finops is a practice. So some of you will have heard of DevOps. It's very, very similar. It brings finance and operations and other parts of the business together. And one of its core goals really is to not only enable faster product delivery, but also to fine-tune your cloud deployments, but from a cost perspective, operational perspective. So whereas operations, especially in a DevOps model, whereas your traditional operations team are there to make sure that your application is both secure, performant, and available. When we talk about FinOps, that changes slightly to make sure that you're making the best use of what you are consuming from a cost perspective and fine-tuning that deployment to make the most effective use of the costs that you are consuming. And there's a few ways that works, and we'll talk about shortly. The principles of FinOps are really 6 things that are really fundamental, from my opinion, to be able to make appropriate use and make the most of your FinOps experience within your organization. You will find a list of principles for DevOps as well. And some of them are very similar, actually, but these ones are very specific to FinOps. So the first one is around collaboration. Now, if you're familiar with DevOps, you will know that collaboration is one of the cornerstones to DevOps. The same applies within FinOps as well. So the whole idea around FinOps is that teams have the ability to collaborate together. And also, much like in DevOps, it is around taking ownership. But instead of taking ownership for what you deploy in your application, it's around taking ownership for your usage, taking ownership for the costs that you are incurring on the business. Another principle of FinOps is around deriving the right amount of business value, and that business value helps drive decisions that you make on your cloud platform. Coming down the list a little bit, the next one's around reporting. So it's no good having reports that come out sporadically at different times in a month, and reports that contain different pieces of information, don't have the same time grain, those sorts of things. So reports should be both accessible and timely. One of the other things that I've not added onto there, actually, which probably should be around reports, is that they should be standardized. And what I mean by standardized is not that it's the same reports every month, it's that the charts that you show, if you draw charts that show cost, the attention to detail means that your scales should be exactly the same. So where you're depicting cost on the scales should be shown exactly the same. And that means that whatever chart you're looking at across the whole reporting stack or your whole FinOps practice, they're very easy to interpret. First of all, they're very easy to understand, and regardless of which one you're looking at, you understand fundamentally exactly what data is being shown, and if it's at a certain point of the chart, you know what that means from a monetary perspective. So consistency is very important when it comes to reporting. One difference to DevOps is that generally with FinOps, it is a centralized team that drives the FinOps experience within your specific organization. So whereas DevOps is generally a collaboration effort between certain teams, collaboration is still very important, as we've discussed, but it is usually a centralized team that drives FinOps. That could be a virtual team. It doesn't have to be a physical team. And in most organizations I've worked with, it is exactly that. It is a virtual team made up of members from different parts of the business that come together to practice the principles of FinOps. And then last but not least is taking advantage of one of the biggest benefits of the cloud, which is its variable cost model. And this it sounds very basic, but it's something that a lot of people don't practice. And it's making sure that your workloads are scalable so that they can make the most of the resources that they have available. If you don't need the resources, they can scale down so you're more cost efficient. But if you need those resources, you scale up, and again, you're more cost efficient. Because what happens when you don't scale up is applications can become unavailable. And when those applications become unavailable, that has a cost impact on the business as well. So downtime costs the business money. So spending that little bit extra when you need it is actually taking good advantage of that variable cost model, because you may only need it for 10-15 minutes, but that might stop 10-15 minutes of downtime where everyone is unable to access your platform or your application, and that could cost the business money. Excuse me. So next I want to talk about the capability architecture of Finops, and there's quite a lot of information on here, so we're going to step through it left to right as methodically as we can, to make sure it's easy to understand. So if you look at the top here, you can see that the 6 columns that are defined there are actually grouped into 3 different categories. So on the left, you have inform, in the middle is optimize, and then on the right is operate. So if you think about DevOps again, where we have the infinity cycle that shows the different elements of DevOps and the different phases of DevOps, this is something very similar, but for FinOps. So I want to first start talking about inform. So inform is about 2 things. It's around understanding your costs and benchmarking your performance. So on understanding your costs, one of the best things you can do is set your tagging strategy and make sure your tagging strategy is part of any compliance that you might run as an organization. So Azure specifically has some really great tools and features in Azure policy to make sure that tags are set appropriately. And when you set tags appropriately, you can look at costs more efficiently and more effectively, and look at the costs of specific tags and how much of a proportion of them are assigned to your overall cloud usage. Now, if you want the ability to create any sort of reporting around chargeback, where as an IT division, you charge back the cost to another division for running their infrastructure, or even just show back where you show them what the costs are, but you don't expect the money back within your business unit. Setting appropriate tags and having them part of your compliance strategy is actually fundamental. It's something you can't really do without having a good handle on where your costs are and what your costs are within your organization in relation to your cloud spend. Having this enabled gives you that level of understanding and gives you the ability to map any spending data you might have to the rest of the business. That then allows you to create and define budgets, help forecast information for the future. One of the biggest criticisms you'll hear from finance teams about the cloud is the unpredictable costs involved with running a cloud environment. 1 month it's $100, the next month it's $200, the month after it's $150, the next month it's $700. You know, those unpredictable costs are what finance teams want to understand more and be able to understand those in detail so that they can create those appropriate pieces of information to show back to the rest of the business. One of the other things that it's important to do with this, and this goes into a level of optimization through things like reservations, is being able to calculate any custom rates that you might be privy to as a customer. Some customers have custom rates for various different things. It might be that the type of plan you want has a different rate. So if you're in education, if you're with a CSP, or if you're on an enterprise agreement, your rates may be different. And then amortization is the final part of understanding your costs. And amortization is basically the way in which we calculate the actual cost of a resource spread over a period of time. So for instance, your amortized costs go to try and reflect how much your reservation is costing month to month. So when you buy a reservation, you pay for that upfront, or you can pay for that in monthly chunks, but that is not the actual cost of the resource in the background. And if you were to look at usage, you would see that there is a 0 value for wherever that reservation is being applied. But if you look at amortization metrics within Azure Cost Management, you can look at what your amortized costs are. So all of that upfront cost is then spread across the life of your different reservations. That can be bought over 1 or 3 years, so you get an accurate level of insight into exactly how much your environment's costing, even when you've bought reservations. It doesn't skew the costs one way or the other. The next part of Inform is around benchmarking your performance. And this is where reporting comes in to its own, really, creating different types of scorecards, different metrics and KPIs that track those different metrics. You can use that information to see how you're doing. Like, there is no point in setting metrics and KPIs unless you have a benchmark to work against. It may be impossible to reach a metric without first understanding how you're performing as an organization. Once you have that information, you can then create meaningful targets which can be hit, rather than creating targets which are, actually impossible to hit. So having that level of understanding helps drive your benchmarking scenarios. One of the other things you can do as well, if applicable, because not everyone publishes this data, but you can benchmark both internally against other teams, which you can obviously do as the custodian of that data, or if available, you can benchmark against industry peers, see how much you're spending versus your competitors. That's often quite privileged information and is not all that accurate. But benchmarking is something that a lot of organizations do to see how they are performing against other organizations. Next is around optimize. So this is going back to one of the principles we were talking about, decision making and real-time decision making, specifically in this scenario, and around optimize usage. So firstly, around real-time decision making, this is using the cost data we have to find and remove underutilized services, identify anomalies, and provide timely and consistent spend data. So that's reporting that we've talked about there, the last point, but it's also around identifying anomalies, as we were saying. So anomalies with cost, stable environments bubble along, consuming very consistent amounts a day with sometimes pence or pounds difference. But in highly scalable environments where workloads may be scaled up or down, both horizontally, vertically, that can cause anomalies. That can cause things that break your cost, break the budgets that you've set, and various other metrics that you've put in place. So being able to identify those anomalies is really, really important. And being able to identify anomalies based on things that people have done or deployed is very important as well. And it's not around catching people out or calling them out for deploying something that they maybe shouldn't have done, or they've deployed the wrong SKU. It's around creating ownership and having that understanding that, yes, you've made a mistake and mistakes are okay and we can learn from mistakes. That's called a growth mindset. But it's around making sure that people take ownership for that and just say, hey, it's okay, it was only running for 20 minutes, sorted the problem. That's still 20 minutes of something you were expecting to incur as an organization. And if everyone was to do that throughout the course of a year, that adds up to a significant amount of money. So being able to identify anomalies is really, really important. The first point I mentioned around underutilized services. So you will find a lot of things in Azure Advisor that will advise you on reservations to purchase based on usage. It will advise you on virtual machines that are underutilized or overutilized, so they can be right-sized, we call it. And all of that data can then feed into our optimizing of usage, where we do things like right sizing, like we just mentioned. We enable automation to be able to do that for us. And we do something called workload management. And workload management is a continuous process of being able to look at a workload and constantly right size it to make optimum use of the platform that it runs on. So this is making sure, and you could actually say that from month to month, specific virtual machines or different services are not running on the same SKU. They are consistently optimized to be on a different level depending on the demand that they're putting on the platform. And that is a highly automated environment that makes maximum use of the costs that you are consuming in your cloud environment. And then finally on here, we move into operate. So on operate, we are talking not about optimizing usage, but optimizing our rates, optimizing the price that you pay for specific objects. And we're also talking about presenting plans back to the business. So first of all, let's talk about optimizing rates. So within here, there are things you can do around licensing. So license optimization is a big part of this. Being able to make use of hybrid use benefit in Azure is a great benefit for those run virtual machines or SQL workloads. And if they have the appropriate licenses as part of an enterprise agreement with software assurance, you can use those licenses in the cloud and save on pay-as-you-go rates that you would otherwise pay. Utilize marketplace is also a great way to save money. And you might not think this is an obvious one, but sometimes you could deploy a virtual machine, deploy a service with a piece of software on, and that would cost you, say, £100 a month to run. You could deploy the exact same thing from the marketplace in a pre-packaged solution that is managed by someone else, or managed by a partner in some cases, and that would not cost as much to run a month. Those scenarios do exist and are more common than you would think for certain things in the marketplace. So just because you want to run Windows Server 2016 or whatever it is, with whatever application running on top, make sure you look in the marketplace first, because you might find that you can save money based on running that application itself. There's obviously clear operational advantages to that being managed by someone else as well, if that's the case. Next is around selecting the appropriate discounts and flexing your options. Now, it's a bit of a stock market term in some ways, flexing options, but what we mean in a cloud sense is investigating and looking at the different rates that you are entitled to as part of your cloud usage. Now, on certain subscription types, the more storage you consume, the cheaper per gigabyte you pay for your storage. So the more you consume, the cheaper it gets per unit. So this is what we mean by selecting discounts that match flexibility, and also looking at volume discounts. Those are two key things that go into that. And reservations is another obvious place, as well as hybrid benefit, as we've talked about already. But those two things are really, really fundamental. In fact, all of the things that we've talked about there are really fundamental to make sure that you can optimize your rates efficiently. Making sure that you're not paying over the odds for things that you otherwise could save money on is obviously going to bring those operating costs month to month down to potentially more acceptable levels if cost is something that you're worried about within your organization. Excuse me. Last on operate is agile plans to the business. Now, part of Finops is like DevOps is agility. And with all of the information that we've collected so far, we've understood our costs, we've created some benchmarks, metrics, and scorecards. We're working to some real-time decision making, and we're doing certain things to optimize both our usage and the rates that we get. Now, what's important here is that from a communication perspective and a framework perspective, both of those are developed effectively. Your communication strategy is really important to communicate to the business why you're spending what you're spending, especially as those costs fluctuate. But developing a framework that helps you make decisions that aligns with various different business drivers is what gets people on side for the fluctuating costs of cloud. And having proper control when you are able to track and trend and provide estimates as to how much you're spending is what makes people happy, and it's what gives people an understanding of what has been deployed and how much it's costing the business and how much it will cost the business in 4, 6, 9, 12 months time. Put all those in combination with your communication strategy, and you can have ongoing reviews with different stakeholders. You can have them review the costs, review budgets that you've set, and review the KPIs that you're setting. And that is how you start to instill that shared ownership of costs that you're incurring with application owners, product managers, engineers as well, and engineering leaders. It's really a multidisciplinary approach, much like DevOps is. It's not just a job of finance or engineering managers to make sure that costs are brought under control. It's everyone's responsibility to make sure that you are utilizing your costs within the cloud as efficiently as possible. Okay, so we're going to go into Azure Cost Management now and run up a demo. So Jackson, if you could just switch to the screen for me, thank you. So Hopefully you can see that well enough. But for those of you that don't know, we'll step through some of the areas here so you can see everything that's involved, and we'll go through some of the different things that you can do to give you almost a top to bottom of what Azure Cost Management can do. So first of all, this is the overview screen. This is what you will initially get to, almost like your landing page, if that makes sense. And one of the first things you need to be aware of with Azure Cost Management is that it works on scope. So much like most other parts of Azure, we can target both management groups, and you can see the root management group has appeared on the top level there. When you go into there, you can look at certain different subscriptions that are part of your organization. And then when you go down the next level, you can look at your resource groups as well. So it uses the exact same principles that you are used to for everything else in the cloud. There is no difference in here to how you would work and interact with different pieces of data. So we're going to look at a subscription level. So you can just look at the costs as a whole. Now, on the dashboard, there are certain things that you can do. We're going to go through them separately and in a different order. So we're going to ignore what's there for now. First of all, I'm going to jump down to manage subscription under settings. And it's here where you have the ability to look at a high level as to how cost management works within your tenancy. So first of all, it's the ability to create budgets and then schedule exports, which we will come on to shortly. You can also connect into your AWS account as well. So if you use AWS and Azure and have a multi-cloud approach, you can connect into AWS and view your AWS costs within Azure Cost Management. You can set up budgets along there and cost analysis you can look at as well. So you get everything in one specific place. And then at the bottom, what you get there is just some useful links to other types of resources. So we've talked about tags and policy quite heavily. So they feature at the bottom of here as well. So you can get direct links through to those parts of the console. So you can go manage those objects individually. Next, I want to move on to exports. So exports are something that a lot of people don't know much about when it comes to ACM or Azure Cost Management. And what exports do is let you schedule exports of data in a CSV format to a storage account that let you look at your data. So if we go through the wizard, I can show you exactly how this works. So first of all, you have to put in a name. So we'll just call that Cloud Machine Learning Demo. And then you have to pick the metric that you want. So you can look at your actual cost, which is your usage and your purchases. Or you can look at your amortized cost, which is usage and purchases, but within reservations, as talking about there. So what you can also do in here is then select what type of, so it could be a one-time export where you specify a date range, as you can see there. You can also do a daily export of your month-to-date costs. So you put a start time in there as to when you want to have a look at. If your data set is particularly large, you can enable partitioning. So if you have quite large data sets, your report is split up into multiple files. Which is something to be aware of, that if you're expecting a huge amount of data, there may be some performance benefits from turning on partitioning. But bear in mind that your data will then be over multiple files. So you won't have a complete picture in one file of what your spend looks like. And then you basically need to determine where it's going to go. So you create a storage account and you give it a container and a directory. And when you click create, that will effectively go in. We're going to create a new one here. I'm going to create a new resource group for this. It's separate. I'm going to put that into UK South. And I'm going to say that the container is exports, and then monthly. So I can go in and I can go create this now. So obviously it takes all that information, and if the if the storage doesn't exist, it will go off and create the storage, and it will create the account as well as the information that you've specified. And all this is doing is then creating that in the background, and then it is configuring the export to go in and do whatever it needs to do after that. And then what we will see is we will be taken back to the cost management screen once this is validated. It just takes a while to validate. And then from there, you can go look at your export and you can go see the data that's in there. Important thing to remember is that it's a CSV format. So any of the data that comes out of here is in a common CSV format. Other thing to remember as well is you incur costs for the storage account that's created and the files that are put on there as well. So that's one thing to bear in mind, especially with really large data sets. And then coming back to, we don't want to save that. And then once it's created, you would see the information come up into here. And then you can just look directly in the storage account. And directly in the storage account, you can see your exports of data directly within there. Okay, so other things that are useful to know in here before we look at cost analysis. So from a reservations perspective, you can go in here and you can look at your reservations. So if you are an administrator and have access to buy reservations, you can also buy them from here as well. So when you click purchase now, it will take you to the list of things that you can buy reservations for. You select virtual machines, and then in here, no eligible subscriptions, but if you had an appropriate subscription, you would be able to go list. I don't have one that I can use in there, unfortunately, but you'll be able to see all of the list of information as to what's recommended for you. You could look into all products and look at everything as well. And then there's these useful filters on the top here where you can look at those filters and see exactly what it is that you need to look at and what it is that you need to work on to be able to bring some of your costs down. Important thing with reservations, just while we're here and worth mentioning, is quite a lot of people think that you can only buy reservations for virtual machines and SQL databases, but it's important to remember that you can buy reservations for lots of different resources. So you can see blob storage on there as well, managed disks or other things that you can buy reservations for, as well as some platform as a service offerings. So Cosmos DB is another one as well. Also, don't forget that when you buy reservations for virtual machines, they would also apply to things like AKS, so Azure Kubernetes Service, because the hosts that underline your AKS service are fundamentally virtual machines in a skill set. You can buy reservations for them to help manage and bring the cost down of your AKS environment as well. Next, on the connector for AWS. So you can come into here and add connectors in. One of the things it will ask you to do is where you want it to be, what management group you want it to be at, and also tell you about the costs as well. So as it says there, the first 90 days are free from creating a connector. And after that period, you are charged 1% of your AWS costs under cost management. And it's just added onto your subscription as a line item. So it's very easy to see that information coming through. And when you go through some of the basics in there, it'll ask you for some information such as your ARN to be able to give access to Azure Cost Management. There's a link that explains how to get that if you don't know. There's a passcode which is shared between both AWS and be able to share through Azure as well, and you put that ID into there, and also the report name as well that you want to give. And like I said, there's some help links there to be able to look at some of that information as well. Okay, so moving on to budgets, just before we look at cost analysis. So within here, it's very easy to go create budgets. One of the key things within here is to understand this new item that is highlighted at the top. So budget evaluations now include reserved instance and purchase charges. So in the budgets documentation, you can read up more on that, but that's something that's really important. So your budget is now evaluated against not just your usage, but also any reserved instance charges as well as things in the marketplace. But let's go create a new one and look at how this works so you can see in a bit more detail. So first of all, again, works on scope. So the scope is automatically set to what we want to look at. One of the other things that you can do is add specific filters. Now, you remember we talked about a number of different things earlier, specifically around tags. Now, you can come down to tags. And then what this will do is it goes off and it goes and loads the tags within your environment, and you will be able to select specific tags. So within here, I have a number of tag names. So I can go pick environment, for instance. And then while this is loading, this goes and gets all of the specific values that you have. We can load up our dev environment. And what you can see is the graph is starting to be redrawn on the right-hand side. Now, what is happening on the right-hand side is that information is going to help us build a budget. So if you remember by this point, most people probably don't know the true costs of running their actual environments. So this goes some way to be able to help you figure out exactly what you should set as a budget. So here you can see what your costs were last month, what your maximum was over the past 5 months, and what your maximum forecast is going to be as well. And you can see that information through various different charts, and it forward projects and looks back on historical information. And you can see it suggests a budget based on the forecast at the bottom. So if we were to add in 120, for instance, instead, you can see the budget line appears on the graph. And right at the end is very slightly below the maximum as £1. So that month we could potentially go over our budget. And if we want, it stands up fairly nicely. So we can give that a name. We can also say how long we want that to reset. So whether it's monthly, quarterly, or annually. When you look at the data quarterly, your graph will redraw and it will go look at that data and give you a new estimate to look at. Obviously, we were looking at the data monthly before. So this is a slightly different view of that same data, just grouped together. Instead of being monthly, it's grouped together quarterly. So you can see what that's going to be there. So you can see there's obviously been some significant changes in this environment here, and we're now forecasting to be 365 as our budget. So we can accept that. And then next is what alerts do we want to bring out. So what we can actually do here is say that when our forecast is going to be 80% of our budget, which is £292. You can see the blue line that's been drawn on there to specify our threshold. We want to send an alert, and you can create action groups in line with how you would in Azure Monitor. So send email notifications, webhooks to other services, so on and so forth. And you can set them to go to specific action groups. And then you can say when your actual costs of reach 90%, you could potentially send that to another group if you wanted, but it gives you some information. It gives you some idea as to how they're configured. You can select what language you want your alert notifications to be specified in as well. And you can also add specific email recipients, which will give you an idea if you're not in the action group, which don't forget, an action group doesn't have to be an email. It could be lots of different things. But you can also add email recipients in here as well. And it just says at the bottom, just as a reminder, to let you know that when you create a budget, it does not evaluate immediately. It starts in a few hours' time. And I've seen that take up to 2.5 hours before it can start evaluating. So just to kind of word of warning there that once you create this, it is not going to start working immediately. You will need to give it some time before you start seeing the benefits of what you've created. Now, next is to look at cost analysis. Now, cost analysis is where I would get most customers to spend most of their time, because this is where all of the information is, and we can carve up the information here and find out lots of information in using lots of different ways. And we're going to go through some of those examples now. So one of the things that I'm sure people who are joined in here get asked all the time is, why is my bill increased, or what resource is responsible for my bill increasing? Those sorts of questions will come up all the time. So I'm going to see now how you can use the cost analysis section of ACM, Azure Cost Management, to be able to find out those questions. So just a little drive around, excuse me, what is on the screen here to start with. So at the top, again, you can change your scope. You can look at predefined views within here as well, and we'll look at some of those in a second. You can specify your date range that you want to look at. It's highly customizable. If one of these options doesn't suit, you can specify your own custom range if you would like to. You can also add filters. So this is akin to what we were looking at earlier, and you can use tags to look at that data as well. And we will do that as we go through. Here you can look at what your actual costs are. You can also look at your amortized costs. Important to note that if your amortized costs are the exact same as your utilized costs so far, then effectively you probably don't have any reservations. It's very easy to be able to see that information. So let's just go back to actual costs. You can see they are both the same. And that's right, because we don't have any reservations. So there's no benefits from us from that perspective. You can look at our forecast on here as well. We can hide the forecast if we want, or put the forecast back on. And then any budgets that we've created, we can either add a new one from here, or we can look and add additional budgets on. And then there's some grouping options for us, as well as granularity. How granular do we want that data to be? And what type of chart do we want to look at as well? So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to look at this data throughout the last quarter, so January to March. So first of all, we have to go click that date range, and then we will see some very similar chart draw. But instead of showing it accumulated, what we're going to do is we're going to show that data monthly instead. So this just takes a second to go get the data and display it back onto the chart. But instead of a left to right ramp, you will effectively get one that it is. There you go, very consistent. And then we will change that to look at a column. So you can see very slight increase over time on the costs that we've seen, which is absolutely fine. But what we might want to do here, excuse me, is say look at the last 6 months instead. So what we're trying to do here is find an anomaly in our bill, in our usage that we want to look at and we want to investigate further. And that is something that we can try and figure out here. So one of the things you can see here is between December and January, we had an increase of just under £200. And that's not too bad. That's something that we're hopefully okay with. So we can go back even further. And you can look at costs that go back until you started your Azure consumption. I've not yet got to a limit that says how quickly, got to a limit that defines how far back you can go. I've gone back 3 years in some cases to look at some of this data. And now here we are. So what we're going to look at here is between September and October. So you can see in September, our costs went from 1,934 all the way up to 2,648. So what we're going to do is we're going to set a custom range, and we're between the 1st of September and October. We can just look at those 2 months side by side. And this information that you saw here, we should just see as 2 bars once this redraws, and we should be able to see that data a bit. Now, what we could do is there's no grouping at the minute, so it's very difficult for us to tell what the increase in those costs were. So what we can do now is we can go onto service name, we can group by service name. And what this will do is it now goes off and regathers all that data for us, but groups it by the type of or the service name that was used. So here you go. And you can see now that this light blue is virtual machines, then storage, Azure App Services, SQL, Log Analytics, Azure Bastion, and so on and so forth. And there's also others as well. But in this case, others hasn't accounted for a huge increase. So we're going to now why our bill has gone from just under 2,000 here to just over 2,600 there. And we're going to take off some of the things that don't make sense to us. And we can see some of this information now starts to redraw for us, and we can see exactly what some of these cost differences are. And the big one, which was fairly obvious from the beginning, is that our virtual machine costs have pretty much doubled. So now what we can do is we can group by, we can filter by service name, sorry, not group by, we can filter by service name. So if you pick service name from the filter at the top, and then we have to wait for a list of things to load. Under here, we can select virtual machines, and we can click a little tick to redraw this information. It's not going to show us anything different to start with because we're still grouping by service name. But what you can now do is you can group by resource. And grouping by resource lets you group by the actual specific resource which is incurred to those costs. And this is something that's really interesting to look at as more data comes in. So you can see that AKS is responsible for a large amount of these costs. But this one here, the system pool skill set, is one of the interesting ones. So you can see that this specific virtual machine skill set here has gone from £53.26 up to £193.49. So if you imagine that on the top, that takes us up over 600. And then one that has made a big difference is our node pool. So you can see our Linux node pool has gone from 26.77 up to £192.02. So what we've been able to do there very quickly, and just by drilling into the data, starting at an overall level, then grouping by service name, then filtering on that service name, and then looking at grouping by resource after that, we've gone down numerous steps to be able to look at exactly what costs we're incurring. And what you can do from here, you don't have to keep repeating this. You can save that view. So I can save a view within the same scope, and I can call this resource costs, or I might call it cost by resource. Sorry, cost by resource service, and you could save that if you wanted. So in here, what you can then do is you have a shared view. So no matter where you look now, and there is a cost by resource already built in that you can see, what you can do is you can then go back to look at the data. It's cached, so it comes back really quickly. And you can just change the banding of the dates that you want. So one of the things there that we've kind of learned to do is very quickly, we've been able to identify 3 causes for our costs increasing. And in this case, it is both our Linux node pools, so node pool 1, node pool 2, and our AKS system pool. So we've directly identified the specific resources which are responsible for our costs increasing. Obviously, what you can do now is up to you as an organization, but you can use that information to go look at those resources, change some of the scaling settings, change the configuration to go manage those costs more efficiently in the future. That information presented out on a monthly basis, for instance, by tag. So we've talked about tags already. So if you were to group that out by, I don't know, display name, whatever tag is on, pull name, for instance, in this one. If you were to go group that information by tagging, you had environment and workload tags spread throughout your organization, and you would be able to see and look at those costs and see per environment, per workload, exactly what costs are being consumed where, by what resource, and how much they're responsible for that information going up. And just finally, you could look at that information in tabular format as well. You can export that information to a CSV or an Excel, look at that in Excel, and use things like pivot tables to be able to look at the differences in dates between the two resources and be able to look at that information, filter it within here as well, and really drill into this data in more detail and get some very specific pieces of information that will tell you exactly what is responsible for your increase in costs. So as we start to wrap up, hopefully that gives you some information as to how to drill into your costs more effectively. This is something that's very easy to show you, and something that lots of people ask all of the time. So hopefully, if you've got any concerns with costs, this has gone some way to answering some of those concerns. I've also talked to you a little bit about Finops as well, and the importance of putting a practice around this rather than everything just being ad hoc. Costs change and fluctuate, environments change and fluctuate as well. Make sure you have a practice using some of the Finops principles that we've talked about to be able to put a proper process and wrapper around some of these things so that you are talking about the same thing month to month using the same metrics and able to efficiently track stuff throughout the course of an application's life cycle. So with that, I've not seen any questions come in, but if anyone has any questions, then please feel free to ask away. Otherwise, if you don't want to ask on here, you can find me on Twitter. My handle is Mr. Coops. That's MrCoups. Always available on there to answer any questions if anyone has them. But yeah, for that, back to Jackson.
Okay, Martin, thanks for the great presentation. Oh my goodness, I was thinking now back when I started in 2015 with Azure. Yeah, we didn't have those, let's say, fancy controls. And then I think this, used to be a really huge stress for everybody. But yeah, I'm really pleased and happy to see all the, let's say, the improvements Microsoft did on that cost control. Really, really great. Yeah, for everybody joining us today, please don't miss next Wednesday. Okay, next Wednesday, April 27th, we are back. And the presentation is going to be Automate Azure Role-Based Access Control using Azure DevOps. And then it would be great if you guys from home could, let's say, join this session too. And for the last time, yeah, one more time, if you haven't registered yet, just please feel free to follow the link I just pasted a few minutes ago, and then to get some additional information from let's say, Microsoft on top of what Martin just explained to us. Okay, I think that's pretty much it for today. One more time, thanks very much, Martin. I hope to see you again in the future here for some other presentations.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you. Okay, everybody, thanks for joining us today, and I will see you next time again. Stay safe. Thank you.